welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and the other host this week after joining us after a few months of break, returning, and he is from the Ronin Council. I used to work with him. Sam, welcome back on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. I am recently moved, mostly unpacked, and fairly unrested, but happy to be here.
Well, it's very much appreciated, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who missed you here on the show. But first off, if this is your very first episode of the podcast, the way we format it is we go through this week's news, and then we end it with the Brokehead Block, which is the more personal side of the show, what Sam and I have been up to since you last heard us. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 571. Kicking it off with a bit of gaming news, as just last week, we were going over how Microsoft promised that Game Pass would not go up in price. And I did say that I would easily pay $25 a month for this thing. I think it's underpriced. Well, Microsoft thought so too, and Xbox Game Pass prices are officially increasing. So with the base subscription going from $9.99 to $10.99 per month, and then the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate going from $14.99 to $16.99. So this price change will be implemented on July 6th, but existing customers won't be affected until August 13th. The price increase of Xbox Series X will also be a thing, so this is something they announced hand in hand. So in select countries, not in North America, not in the US at least, but in other countries, I know we have international broadcasts, starting on August 1st, the Xbox Series X prices are going up, Series S remains unchanged, which is another unsurprising move since I think PlayStation 5 recently did this too.
Look, the Game Pass price increases, to be honest, are very reasonable. It's $1 a piece. That works out to $12 extra a year. And Game Pass library is completely absurd. It's still a good deal. So I don't think anyone should be overly upset about it. You know, if they increase the price again, 2 months down the line by $5, then maybe I'll be like, oh, okay, I understand. But it's $1. This is fine. Every time streaming prices increase, it's by at least double, if not triple this. So this is completely fine.
I still think they're underpricing it, to be honest with you, but they're probably trying to build an install base, trying to grow the numbers first, kind of like Netflix did or any other streaming service. And then once you have large numbers, then you start getting more content and making the price increases, which Microsoft recently did with Activision Blizzard, which I'm pretty sure that deal is going through, which would justify a lot of these price increases as well. And it's something that, again, I won't bat an eye on when I get my Xbox Series S or X this holiday season, based on what the deals are. Game Pass is a must. I want to go in and I want to play those old Halos that I never played and play all the old Fable, for example. Scott, that's one of Scott's favorite Xbox games. That's what's making him get the new Series X this holiday season, I think, too. So, like you said, very minimal pricing increase, even though, again, Microsoft just said. But last year, Phil Spencer said they're going to raise the prices. So it was going to happen.
Like you said, this is still honestly underpriced. A gaming subscription with that large of a library, I would expect to cost $20 at minimum. So it's this is still probably the best deal you can get as far as just you pay that and then you get those games. It's very good. It's not like Steam where, and I use Steam, but it's you don't pay for Steam, but you pay for each individual game. And for some of them, you're just waiting for them to go on sale or something. Otherwise, you're paying full price the whole time. It's not like going to a game store back in the day where you're used copy for 30% off. The prices are what they are. So Game Pass having the catalog it does, and then you still paying that rate is still extremely reasonable.
Well, one of Microsoft's plans to increase that library even more was to get more companies outside of Activision Blizzard. So in the recent court case that's still going on right now regarding Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, new evidence has emerged through emails showcasing their interest in building Game Pass by getting and purchasing studios such as Sega, Bungie, Niantic, IO Interactive, and Zynga. The ongoing trial still seeks to figure out if there's any antitrust concerns with this deal. But just because they said these were the plans doesn't mean that they are not still the plans. I mean, these are pretty big gets, and I think Sega and probably Niantic might be some of their bigger hits if they're able to get them.
I mean, yeah, like Sega alone, that's a massive, massive catalog of games, right? Like, obviously, you have all the old arcade classics that people associate with Sega, like Sonic and all of those Pizza Hut arcade games, as I like to call them. But there's also, all of their new stuff that you don't necessarily think of it as a Sega game, but, they're responsible for a ton of massive RPGs that have come out over the past decade that have done exceedingly well. So if Microsoft was able to include those in their catalog, that would just be even more money coming through the door.
One of my favorite things is when I posted this on Sonic groups and on the Xbox forums and everything on Facebook, the Sonic groups were like, well, they were all up in arms, like, no, Microsoft, stay away. You don't need Sonic the Hedgehog. And I'm like, they're not buying it for Sonic the Hedgehog. They'd be buying it for shit like Yakuza, and shit like that.
Exactly. all of those massive multi-million-dollar RPGs that have come out recently that people, it's still very much in the forefront of people's minds and are, for one reason or another, kind of hard to get a hold of. Like, that would be a lot of money coming their way.
The other thing that aged someone on Facebook was they were like, well, Microsoft and Xbox do kind of need a mascot, someone outside of Master Chief. And I'm like, this isn't the 90s. Like, the mascots are useless right now. Like, no one's buying systems over Sonic's faster than Mario type of shit.
Yeah, that's like saying they really need to get, their name on a Coke product or something so that they can push the numbers up. Like, no one's buying Mountain Dew to get the Halo codes.
Exactly. Well, now we've got some comic book news as the Jack Kirby estate recently responded to a Stan Lee documentary that went up on Disney+. So they criticized the documentary for repeating false ideas about the creation of Marvel characters and neglecting Jack Kirby's contributions. So the estate highlighted Kirby's importance in co-creating the Marvel Universe and expressed their commitment to protecting his legacy. They did encourage people to explore Kirby's version of the superhero creation process and expressed a desire for a documentary that presents both sides of the story. So obviously with Disney telling the story, they're not going to admit that there's any kind of wiggle room as to how much ownership Stan Lee had when he signed it all over to Sony and Disney and everyone else. I mean, this is one of those things that obviously it was going to be more biased towards Stan Lee. But if anyone goes through, and a great book that I really enjoyed is The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee, it breaks down not just Kirby, but also like Steve Ditko and how Stan Lee really took a lot from them, claimed it as his own, and ran away with that idea while paying them nothing for the creation. He would give himself the 3 paychecks of like artist, writer, editor, and he would just give them the artist paycheck. And so that caused a lot of friction between these two giants and Stan Lee. So I could see why the estate is pretty upset about their version of events.
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, it seems like this is a thing that we're learning more and more about, not just with the Stan Lee from this era of comics in general. I don't know if you saw it, but there was that Batman and Bill documentary that came out a few years ago. Mm-hmm. It was like an oddly similar situation with Bob Kane and Bill Finger. So you really kind of have to wonder how much of a common practice this was. But I would love to see a Jack Kirby documentary because obviously he's been shortchanged literally and figuratively for decades upon decades. And I would just love for, I think, more people to be aware of how much he contributed because, not even if it weren't with Disney, it would almost have the advantage of them not having to focus solely on his Marvel work either, because Jack did a ton of work at DC as well. That I think people really don't associate with him or anyone because he's been so, not shunned, but overlooked for all of the work that he did in the industry.
Yeah, and he had a lot of great co-creations. I know even in the creation of the Hulk, Stan Lee had his own, like, I made this up. And even he's on record saying, oh, Jack, helped create the character mainly. And then Stan Lee later was like, we really just wanted someone big. And I thought the Hulk, like he just came up with it magically, like later on in later years. But yeah, you're right. One thing I'm grateful for is, yes, it's terrible that he was not paid what he deserved while he was living. The estate did get a settlement years ago, but for him leaving Marvel, he went over to DC. He created the New Gods, created Darkseid, Steppenwolf, all of those. And then Thanos was created out of, like, Stan Lee is like, well, we need to create our own version of those new gods, because he saw, now Kirby was a competitor, and this is always how they viewed themselves. The distinguished competition is what he called it. And they created a character that would, if I remember history correctly, I'm trying to see, but they created Thanos at first to copy off of either Steppenwolf or Darkseid, and it was Stan Lee that changed it, or someone else changed it and said, well, if we're going to copy DC, why are we copying Steppenwolf? Why don't we go for the big one and copy, make our own Darkseid? And that's when Thanos was created. And now you have him in a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? A huge character. So without Kirby going over to DC, Darkseid may have been a Marvel creation. Just kind of weird how that history could have been very different.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you look at the two characters, it's like they're oddly similar. So you almost got to go, which of these guys came first? Because it's, that happened constantly back then. It was like, oh, this company's got this type of character. We need, like, look at Green Arrow and Hawkeye, and like there's tons of examples like that. Some of them are more obscure, but like the industry is littered with it, with just like these rivalries, or not even rivalries, but just honestly just straight up like intellectual thefts of people being like, we need that thing. And it's like, all right, well, someone's already doing it. Do you really think it's going to boost sales that much?
We need our own Deathstroke.
Sometimes it did. Yeah, exactly.
Well, before we move on from Jack Kirby, do you have a favorite Kirby creation? I know that's basically me asking you who's your favorite Marvel character, but I mean, he's had his hands in the FF, Thor, Hulk, the New Gods for DC, the Avengers, Black Panther. Do you have a favorite Kirby creation, or co-creation, I should say?
As far as design goes, I had the New Gods Omnibus when I was in high school, and I think some of just the overall designs and how they all feel cohesively connected, like it's very obvious they're meant to come from the same world, but they also all distinct. I think that's really cool. I really like Orion's design. I'm not sure why, but I was always drawn to that. And then obviously Darkseid, something about just like the stone face and how big he was. It was like, okay, I remember feeling like that was the first time reading a Superman comic where I felt like that villain felt threatening against Superman, whereas everyone else, it was like, it's Superman fighting somebody half his size, or that was it's such a clear disadvantage. Whereas like with Darkseid, it's like, oh, this guy is a megalomaniac that has, these Omega beams that we don't even really know what they do, but they're obviously messing people up. And I was just like, this is actually a big deal.
Yeah, those are good picks. Very good picks. And obviously Darkseid we've now seen, and hopefully we'll see more of him on the big screen. But for me, I'm in between Silver Surfer and Magneto. Like, I really like both characters. I'm probably leaning more towards Silver Surfer. And then for DC, I mean, yeah, the obvious Darkseid. I really like Big Barda, especially.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah.
So I couldn't choose, though. It's tough, man. Jack Kirby he's the king.
Did he co-create Mr. Miracle also?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's also a really cool design. Yeah.
Well, some more Disney Plus news here, as Secret Invasion just released, and it's already facing backlash, as it was revealed that AI was used to create the show's opening credits. So the use of AI in the production has sparked controversy and criticism from both artists and fans. And right now, the first episode is streaming on Disney Plus. Disney did assure everyone that no artist jobs were lost in the creation of these opening credits. I went on YouTube and I'm like, oh, well, I mean, how bad could it be? Maybe they just used it as a baseline thing. And I'm like, oh shit, I've seen this kind of stuff on Instagram, like on Reels. People are make it real easily. And it's that weird kind of stop motion-y, like flip book thing that it's a bunch of AI pictures put together. And that's what this was. That's the opening to Secret Invasion. And it looks really bad because right now it's gotten to the point where AI is pulling not just from artists, but also from other artists that are using AI as well. So it's pulling AI from AI. So you get these really weird looking faces, and that's what you got out of this Secret Invasion opening.
Yeah, I haven't watched it, but several of my coworkers have, and one of them said it reminded him of a clip art project you would make in middle school web design.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of my coworkers like are big Marvel fans, and they were just like, they just screwed the pooch on this. It looks bad. It feels very cheap, and it sets it's a bad tone for the show. So that I don't think that was the right way to go with that one.
Well, that's a very blatant example, that opening to Secret Invasion. You can tell in the Flash movie, they apparently did use AI, and you can tell in some of the weird faces where they put this guy's face on this body. There's like a Jay Garrick apparently in the film that they pulled from the CW show, and it turns out it's the first Google image that you pull up on Google when you type in Jay Garrick live action or even just Jay Garrick, and it's not even the right version of him. So that's how they know that they used AI to pull that particular scene. But where do you fall on the use of AI as far as another art tool, or should it just not be used at all?
I do think there's a way to use it responsibly. Look, I'm not a tech head, but I actually was listening to a podcast earlier that was talking about, specifically they were talking about the writer's strike, and they were saying like, AI is inevitable. It's been in development for decades at this point, and there is a way for creative people to use it responsibly. The mistake is, I think, trying to use it to just flat out replace entire industries of jobs, because it's still a long way off from like understanding just the way a human brain would interpret things, especially when it comes to art and storytelling, because essentially the way it was explained to me is AI is going to take the most straightforward path with anything. So It doesn't understand subtleties, or when you're talking about writing, things like plot twists, and something that they brought up specifically is it uses the most common denominator for things. So it's going to become problematic culturally later because it doesn't account for things other than single white men for the most part. So like, if they become overly reliant on it, it's going to be just very samey projects. I'm on the side of like, I think there's a way to get there and for it to be used as a tool by creative people, but it's something that, for lack of a better word, I think needs to be supervised. I think being like, we can save so much money by getting rid of all of our writers and artists if we just have AI write for it is a death sentence for a company, because it's just not going to do what they think it is.
Yeah, I think what's dangerous about it is that any company can take, whether it's art or like text AI, and say, okay, well, this is the kind of movie we want. We want to make sure we hit this check mark, and this. So let's punch that in. It'll spit out a script, and then we can hire one guy to clean up the script, and that'll be the film that we want. And that's very different than something like where inkers got replaced. Like there's less and less comic book inkers in the industry now because a lot of artists draw digitally and they ink as they go. They color on top of that as well. Some of them will just be a colorist and an inker and the overall sketch artist all in the same comic book. And you're seeing that that's more often. And yeah, that particular tool did replace some jobs, but it also made the process a lot quicker for some artists. Whether or not you prefer digital versus traditional, that's a whole different argument. But as far as just talking tools, I don't think that was anywhere near as harmful as something like this, where a non-artist can take it, run away with it, and if you have enough money, just make the thing that I told you to make. And that's what you were saying. That's the problem. And I think that hopefully people would be able to tell, like, this is kind of a shitty project or this is not very good, never reveal that it is AI. And hopefully they're like, well, anytime we use AI, it seems like they underperform. And I think that's probably what will speak to these studios, because tweeting at them and everything, that's great. It does work for a lot of things, but the dollar is mighty. That's what they definitely understand. And once they start releasing more of this AI stuff out there that's a little less recognizable to the consumer, but they're still like, this is kind of shitty, that wasn't good, then maybe that's when they'll say, okay, maybe we do need the writers more than we need the computer.
Right. And I think you like touched on a very key part of it that I haven't really thought of a lot, is I think they need to not tell people it's AI. And that way it's obvious that like people can distinguish this, like not even that this is AI, just that it's bad. And then when they look back and say, oh, the AI projects that we put out have underperformed, so we're really not gaining money by doing this because it's sunk cost, right? Like we're losing the labor cost, but we're losing money on the overall project itself. So it's actually not profitable.
Well, hopefully we don't see it used too soon as far as superhero films, as Sony, we got a couple projects from them. They did remove the release date for the movie El Muerto, which is a lesser known Marvel character, but one that they do own the film rights as a part of the Spider-Verse. So the lack of updates and ongoing writer strike likely influenced this decision. So currently Dumb Money and the Book of Clarence have new release dates, but it is unclear if El Muerto is delayed or canceled. So right now Sony is aiming to bring more obscure Marvel characters to the big screen. One of the other reasons they were saying is because it delayed the production, the writer strike, that the star, Bad Bunny, I think is his name, is going on tour when they said, okay, well, how about here? And he's like, I'm already on tour by then. And if you don't have that guy, which I hear he's a big artist, that's a big draw for tickets right there. It's kind of like having Jared Leto. He's going to have his fans that are automatically in, no matter what the project is. That's what it seems to be with Bad Bunny. And if you don't have him, I say Sony should scrap it. As much as I wanted to, I'll see anything Marvel Sony, but as much as, we wanted to see that happen, without that guy, take that money and invest it instead into either another Spider project or inject it into something that might have had a lower budget for him.
My view on that is exactly what you said, which is like, if you can't get the main draw to this, and like apparently the lead role or one of the lead roles, like scrap this and inject it into another project that one is currently under budget and needs more work, or B, something like another project that we'll talk about in a little bit here, where it's like this thing did well, but we underpaid people, and there's been issues with it going forward. Something that's hit some roadblocks, and be like, all right, well, you have cash here on hand. Just do the thing that people want, and not take this risk on something that might not pay off and is seemingly like at a full stop here.
Well, let's talk about this troubled production, as it did incredible in theaters. This movie made a lot of money. It's one of the biggest hits this year. But there are behind-the-scene troubles for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which hurts my heart because I enjoyed the movie and I'm rooting strong for Sony Marvel. So there are claims of excessive edits and mismanagement by producer Phil Lord, and this led to long working hours and a rushed production. Sony Picture executives deny Phil Lord's sole responsibility and state that revisions are just a normal part of the process. So anonymous animators did express frustrations over constant changes, cuts, and periods of inactivity that affected the film's project. So they also said, one of the artists, that the sequel, Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, will definitely not come out next year. They said that it has not even begun production, and Sony already announced a 2024 release. So it sounds like there's weak leadership here. And if it's Phil Lord, which all the artists seem to be pointing to, and the directors, that one of them was not present, one was, but they were constantly changing their mind on things, which now they're saying is why we're getting different cuts of the movie in theaters. I mean, it sounds like someone needs to step up and say, look, we need to agree on what the fucking movie's going to be, not make excessive changes, because we're dealing with animation. This isn't something we can go and reshoot. This takes a lot longer to process.
I have the exact same phrasing as you did. It breaks my heart because it's like, I really enjoyed the movie. It's easy, and this is just human nature, right? It's easy to bash something you already don't care about or we're already like skeptical of. But when something you really enjoy comes out and you think is really well done, and then you hear about employee mistreatment and bad management, it's like, oh, fuck, man, that's the last thing I wanted to hear about this, especially because I think the one thing that people were okay with about, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but like there was such a long time gap between 1 and 2, and then 2 ends in a way to where you're like, holy shit, when is the third one coming out? And then we heard next year, so everyone's like, okay, then I'm completely fine with how they pace the story if we get part 3 next year. And if that's no longer the case, I think people out having to wait, because if, it is correct in saying like, certain things, revisions are to be expected to a degree. Like that does happen on pretty much every movie. But when you hear about things like wasted time and like inactivity, that just feels like somebody lost track of what they were supposed to be doing, right? It's like you said, that feels like bad leadership, which is really unfortunate, because now you're talking about having to, going into the third movie, possibly change the entire way the movie's structured from the ground up. And that's a pretty risky prospect. But, your other prospect is, upset workers, underpaid workers, which then eventually are going to quite possibly underperform, and possible delays anyway. So it's like, this is a can't win for losing situation if these reports are true. And it seems like to some degree, at least, they are. So I would agree with you. I think if all signs point to Phil Lord, then something has to happen at that link in the chain, to where, I'm not saying like, flat out fire the guy, but get a supervising director in there to kind of, I guess, task manage, for lack of a better word, or someone at least to keep the actual animation department moving at the correct pace, like essentially have a supervisory like role there to be like, okay, these are the breakpoints we need to hit by this point in time to make sure things get done on time. And, okay, we are now at this point in the process, we're not doing revisions anymore.
Yeah, I hope the answer is not just, well, how are we going to get this out next year? Well, everyone's working overtime. That's what we're going to do. It's like, fuck no.
Yeah, if we've learned one thing in video games and animation, crunch time is the death of good projects. So,
well, I expect a delay. I
sincerely hope that's not it.
Yeah, I fully expect a delay, and I hope there is a delay. Like, I really don't see how they can do this in a good way and still get it out next year. And I'm not maybe there is a way. I'm not a producer at all, so I'm not smart at all when it comes to this. But it sounds like a delay would be best if they want to keep all their animators, give them the extra time they need, really get that script down. Don't fucking change your mind on the dialogue because this looks cooler or this looks better. Just leave it, finalize that script, and get it done. It's part 3. The director's already said this was it. This was their last one. So do it right, delay it an extra year, and I think that may be the course of action.
Right. Oh, for sure.
We've got some Warner Brothers news now, as according to Kevin Smith, Warner Brothers considered making a live-action Batman Beyond movie with Michael Keaton if The Flash was successful. However, since The Flash underperformed at the box office, the future of that project is now uncertain. And like I said on Twitter, we fucking dodged a bullet.
I knew The Flash wasn't going to do well. Do I want a Batman Beyond movie? Absolutely. Do I want it to be shit? Certainly not, because we'll never see it again. Terry McGinnis is not an eternal, enduring comic book character, right, like some of these other ones where it's like, oh, we had a miss, we just reboot it. Like, this is probably going to be a one and done thing if it doesn't do well. Do I like the idea of us never getting one? No, but this is also coming from Kevin Smith, so I take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And like, look, I don't like Kevin Smith, to be transparent, but I do end up reading a lot of stuff he says because he just talks a lot. And so he's put out a couple of, I guess, like newsworthy potential bombs recently. And I don't know, maybe he does have like an inside track on this stuff. He is a director, so maybe he does know what he's talking about when it comes to this type of stuff. But, I don't like the idea of us never getting a Batman Beyond movie, but I would almost say I like the Batman Beyond content I already have, being the animated series and the comic books. I would rather them not go, all right, we're going to put this thing out anyways, and it be some like horrific bastardized version of it. I would rather it just not exist at all.
Under this current regime.
Yeah, exactly. I would certainly rather them just say, that's on hold indefinitely until we can right the ship.
And that's what they need to do, especially. Did you ever hear the story on how Paul Dini and Bruce Timm wrote a live action Batman Beyond film right around in the early 2000s?
I remember talks of like a script circulating, but I wasn't at the age where I was like habitually on the internet like I am now. So I never looked at any of the details about it. And I never heard about like how that pitch came about. I'm assuming it was like on the heels of the animated series, right?
Pretty much. So this was on Paul Dini's podcast back when he was doing it. And he revealed it like a decade ago on there because they were asking him like, why don't you get more gigs on the live action side? How come they don't hire the guys that know Batman inside and out to write up a live action film? And he answered the question. He was like, right in that period before Batman Begins, Warner Brothers was trying to figure out what they were going to do. And Batman Begins was one of those projects. The Darren Aronofsky Batman film was another one. And so was Batman Beyond. And Batman Beyond, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini were hired to write a script for that film. And so they did. And Warner Brothers took it and said, okay, great. Thank you. If we decide to make it, we'll have our guys work on it. And so Paul's like, well, no, we want to continue to, work on the film and we're the writers. And they're like, no, they said something like, we've got actual screenwriters. Like they insulted him in that way. Like they saw him as lesser than because he came from the world of comics and cartoons. And that soured them so much to now Paul Dini, at least, he says he's turned down every live action type of gig like that. The one thing he didn't turn down was Maleficent, which even that he got screwed on from Disney.
Yeah, that's not surprising. I am interested. Do you think that would have panned out well? Because we were kind of talking in Discord about how like often having these comic book writers in the producer director's chair is not always the best idea because they don't necessarily directly translate. I might be biased, but I'm inclined to believe this might have been different because one, they're not talking about directing it, right? They're talking about writing it, which is something they are experienced with. This isn't a Jeff Johns situations where it's like, I'm the head of DC Creative and it's like, homie, you don't have experience with that. That's not going to end well. And it sure didn't.
No, it definitely didn't. Yeah, I think it sounded like they didn't want to, because there was no extended universe. Like that concept wasn't what it is today. So I think they were like, well, we want to be involved in the process as consultants at the very least, right? Like, yeah, we're the writers. We want to be on hand. Here's what you have this in the script. How did you see that part of the film? You got Bruce Timm who can storyboard shit like Zack Snyder does it with his movies. You have another artist here with Bruce Timm who could probably storyboard the whole movie for you. And work with the director on trying to get some kind of compromise between the two or whatever. I think it would have worked out well, but yeah, if they're writers, great. But if you start getting all right, Paul, well, how should we direct this scene? That's when you get into trouble. Or well, Paul, do you think we should introduce this actor and as an extra role or whatever Jeff Johns was doing? Maybe we should get some more humor in here. What do you think? Let's leave all those decisions to you, Paul. Like I think that would have been a terrible idea. And it is a shame because I do think that Paul and Bruce are some of the best superhero writers in the industry. And it's just a shame that it didn't work out. But at the same time, we got Batman Begins out of it and the Dark Knight trilogy out of it, and which led to the movies today, including Man of Steel. So things sort of worked out.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually think that you're completely right. I think especially that's such a unique situation too, right? Where they created that version of the character. So like having the original creators on as consultants and co-writers, I think could potentially be a huge boon because then you don't have to worry about, you know, is this director or is this production company going to understand the character of Terry McGinnis or whoever they decided to have appear in the movie as the villain, because it's like those are literally the people that created those characters. They can tell you whether or not that's correct characterization, or if that's something the character would do, or if that, design choice for like how Neo Gotham is supposed to look fits with what the character's environment. Like, that's very different than being like, all right, man, you have full creative control over everything we do here.
And before anyone wonders of that script, Paul, can you release that? He also immediately said that's property of Warner Brothers. So they could theoretically make that movie anytime they want, or most likely what would happen is they would use that script as a skeleton, best case scenario, and then have other writers rewrite the thing. So unfortunately, he can't release it, and I doubt we'll ever kind of read that script. But as I mentioned, we did get the Dark Knight trilogy out of it, and Christian Bale, who starred in that, amazing Bruce Wayne. I really liked his Bruce Wayne in those movies. He reportedly was offered multiple times a cameo in that recent Flash film, and he turned it down. This is all according to Kevin Smith. He repeatedly declined the offers, and in the past, through interviews, he expressed that he would only consider returning as Batman if Christopher Nolan directed. So if this is true, another one from Kevin Smith, I think it's another dodge bullet. I don't know why he would have declined it, but it sounds like he's like, look, I only want it if Chris Nolan's involved. I don't want to do a whole thing with other guys. And obviously they weren't going to get Nolan because he got fired from Warner Brothers and now he's at Universal. So chances of that ever happening is another one that unless they get Nolan back, we're not going to see his version of Batman.
Yeah, and Christian Bale has honestly said very similar, if not almost identical things before. So from what he has said, which he's not the most chatty celebrity when it comes to like talking to the press or anything, except when he's doing a junket for a film, he said that he's very happy with the films that him and Christopher Nolan made. And he feels like it tells a complete story. So he has no interest in revisiting that character unless Chris were to come to him with a script saying like, hey, I have another idea for where that character can go. So I think this is probably completely accurate. It just adds up what Christian Bale said about the character before. Like, he knew going into it. Supposedly, Chris had told him like during or right at the end of Batman Begins, he knew where the character was going to end. So like, I think Christian Bale is completely content with where that character left off, and he has no desire to go back, even as a cameo, unless Christopher Nolan were to say, I have another idea. So, yeah, he dodged a bullet, and I would have honestly been upset if I had heard that version of the character showed up in a shit movie.
Right, because he would have been all CG'd also, or they would have CG'd the suit on him, because they all look fucking terrible, all those little cameos.
Oh, it would have been some weird, like, Uncanny Valley deep fake shit.
And on the same Facebook groups, they were saying, well, he turned down the Flash, but he starred in that shitty Thor film. And it's like, well, one, he didn't know that he was going to be that terrible, whatever Thor ended up being. But he's already said in interviews that he did that for his kids because his kids really wanted him to be in a Marvel movie. And he's like, all right, so I guess he's the villain in that last Thor film. But he has no idea what any of this stuff is. Like in one of the interviews, they asked him, how do you feel about being a part of the MCU? And he's like, what's the MCU?
Well, and let me say this too. Like, one, I watched that Thor movie recently. It's bad. Christian Bale's good in it though. Like, he's the only good part.
That's what I'm saying. They waste all this talent in those. Like, they get these great talent people like Christian Bale, and it's like, it's a waste if they put him in the MCU. They're not going to be used well. And
also when, not to just like gush over him, but I mean, he's an amazing actor, but like when actors read scripts, it doesn't say anything about how it's going to translate as far as the CG goes, or like the changes they make day of on set, which happens a lot. It's hard to pick him apart for saying, why'd you take this shit role in the MCU when he did it for his kids, but also like, he could have read that script and said, this seems fine. And then they go in and, make a bunch of changes and add a bunch of unnecessary CG and over the top humor when he's probably honestly just looking at his own character's parts and going, yeah, I could do that.
Did they end up putting a lot of humor in his scenes, or was that mainly what they kept serious? Because it doesn't seem like something Christian would be down with.
His character's pretty serious. It's supposed to be, it's a thing we've seen quite a bit of now, but it's supposed to be like, he's a pretty menacing bad guy, but it's kind of, it hits that point of like, this guy's not entirely wrong either. Like, you can understand why he's going out to kill gods and stuff. His is the only like part any levity in the whole movie, and everything else it's just peppered with jokes. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy are in this movie to give you a scope of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that says it all. I don't know if you ever saw a concept art, just because we're talking about Christian Bale and being Batman. By the end of Dark Knight Rises, he was tired of Batman, right? Like he was in interviews, he was constantly talking about how this was the last one and how the suit was a pain in the ass, even when they upgraded it. That the concept art, did you ever see the art to BVS where it did have Christian Bale's Batman fighting Superman?
No, but I bet that looked amazing in the storyboards and stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot closer to the Dark Knight Returns comic book. Originally, they were going to do it during winter with snow, and that's when that film was going to take place. And I forgot if it was a studio mandate to like, no, don't put snow in it. I forgot what it was, but they ended up changing it to rain in the final cut. But as soon as Christian said, like, no, I'm really done with Batman. I'm not going to do, even though Man of Steel was originally set in the Nolan verse, and BVS was going to be the next one in that same Dark Knight, what would have been a 5-parter. As soon as Christian said, I'm not going to be in it, they then had to make the decision of, okay, are we recasting this character, or are we considering this a reboot? And that's when they went forward with the reboot. They did the Dark Knight Returns Batman with Ben Affleck, which is still, it almost tracks still with where Dark Knight Rises would have left. But now they went with a more comic book accurate rather than like the steeped in realism that came from the Nolan verse. So I just thought that was cool. If anyone ever wants to check out that concept art, it is online.
Yeah, that is super cool. I do like the BVS Batsuit a lot too, but it would have been cool to see, what could have been with the Bale version of Batman. Obviously him and Ben are very different builds and stuff too. So it's an interesting what if.
Well, here we have some sad San Diego Comic-Con news. First, E3 seems to not really have a future, but now it's looking like Netflix is joining Marvel Studios and HBO in skipping this year's San Diego Comic-Con. So this decision comes after Netflix recently held its own fan event, To Doom, where they made major announcements. So with limited plans for San Diego Comic-Con, fans will miss the chance to see their favorite stars in person. So I think it's another product of, I hate to blame it all on COVID, but a lot of companies realize that, well, during the shutdowns, we'll do our own thing. And then they realize, wait, why don't we just keep doing our own thing? Why are we paying this place to host when we have our own platform?
Yeah, I honestly think this is going to be what these cons look like going forward. As someone that does not the same types of conventions, but does conventions of a type for work, the vendor fees are insane, man. So like, I cannot fault anyone for being like, why the fuck would I pay SDC or MegaCon? All of these vendor fees plus setup booth fees and, the completely like unreliable amount of traffic for any one individual booth to dictate the profit we bring in, which like first of them, it's gotta be when you go to these cons, the whole point for the con goer is like, how much shit can I see in one day? It's not to patronize one booth heavily. Like it honestly defeats the purpose of them. So it honestly just makes fiscal sense for these companies to go, why would we not just do our own thing and solely pay for the price of venue that we have them at, where it's only going to be us. People are only going to spend money on our products. Like it only makes sense. And then people can pick and choose what they go to.
Yeah, hopefully this doesn't mean the end for San Diego Comic-Con. I think conventions as a whole will be fine, just because they don't rely on like a Hall H presentation or that coverage that San Diego Comic-Con definitely is known for. And I think that there'll always be a place for comics at conventions, even though, we're in a bit of a lull as far as comic sales. I think that there'll always be a place for them. And I hope that this means the focus shifts a little bit more to the stuff that inspired these things on television and on the big screen, which are the creators and the comic books. And I get that that's not the most profitable thing and probably won't happen, but maybe this will get some more of the locals, I guess, or the ones that are there for the artists or some of the vendors even, rather than, okay, I'm here to spend all day at Hall H so I can blog about it or whatever, Instagram, tweet it, whatever.
Yeah, when I used to go to the cons regularly as just a con goer, that was what I went for, was for artist signatures, picking up like con exclusive works and stuff, trying to get sketches, things like that. Now I feel like the whole draw of cons is like, what's the biggest celebrity name we can get in here? It doesn't even matter, it feels like, anymore if they're related to any like typical quote unquote con related project. It's literally like you go to MegaCon, it's like, here's the stars from like the CW reality shows. It's like, what the fuck are they here, man? I'm here to get Tyler Kirkham's signature on my Green Lantern comics.
Well, you know what, man? More room for us, because that's one thing I've
exactly.
noticed. Like, I can go to Artist Alley and I can walk right up to like David Nakayama. Fuck, great, awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But I do like the idea of a more like centralized con for the artist and stuff, because like I want is to make a living. And I feel like it's almost like ADHD culture when you go in there, where it's so overwhelming for a lot of people that it's just decision paralysis. Like, I'm sure some of the artists are making decent money, the big mega stars, but like I want, the more independent artist and the guys that I like to be able to, make a reasonable amount of money at the con and for it to be profitable for them.
Especially since when they work for the big two, they're not the greatest with royalties, so they really count on these conventions to really get them extra income while they're also drawing and making the next comic. You'll see them, like, if you follow any one of them on Instagram or Twitter, they're like, all right, time to work on this book some more. Like, after I'm done with these convention commissions. And then it's like, holy shit, like they're really working around the clock and they got to make ends meet. That's the struggle, but they do it because they love it. But, obviously, like you were saying, we want to help them out, though. We hope that they're successful enough to where maybe they can do one less show that year.
Right. Exactly. So that, they can focus on their book, or, they're still humans, man. They got lives. I'd like to think that when Dustin Nguyen or, Jeff Lemire clocks out, like they get to do something they enjoy, whether it's spending time with their kids or whatever. And it's not just like, all right, I punched out from con life. I gotta start, finding my next gig so that I can, keep continuing to churn the mills and just get a reasonable wage out. Like, I don't want, talented artists and writers to have to live essentially the way a lot of us live, where it's like, all right, I just got to keep churning here to keep afloat. Like, that sucks when somebody's putting out stuff that, a lot of people get a lot of value out of.
Well, I'll tell you something that'll make you feel a little bit better. We're richer than Warner Brothers Discovery. They are billions of dollars in debt. They're so in debt that they are in talks to sell about half of its film and TV music publishing assets for about $500 million. So this deal, overseen by attorney Alan Grubman, may involve selling rights to major labels with Sony as the frontrunner. The assets include music from films like Purple Rain and Batman, but their value and relevance are still questioned. So this sale would help Warner Brothers Discovery pay off its $49.5 billion debt, and comes during a challenging time for the company with layoffs and management changes. So when I posted this, I was like, they're fucking broke as fuck, man. Like, they're doing NFTs, they're doing these music licenses, and someone on Facebook's like, it's just music licenses, come on. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what company is known for selling off its music license? Broke fucking companies. Zaslav is piecing it out little by little because guess what just fucking flopped? This happened a week after The Flash flopped. So there's correlation there.
Yeah, it definitely feels like The Flash was their last ditch effort. Like they hyped that movie up so much, and it still shat the bed. So also
Super Bowl
Sony
commercials.
Music, yeah, sorry, Warner Brothers Music was a huge deal when I was in high school and college. Like if a band you liked got signed to Warner Brothers, that used to mean they had made it big. So like the fact that they're going to sell off that catalog, that means they're in bad shape.
These are pretty big musical pieces. Like this isn't just like, all right, well, you can have these for a year. Like this isn't fucking streaming. Like selling off the publishing licenses to this, it is a big deal. It really is a big deal. And you know what? Good though. Like they chose this fucking path, man. This is what they chose. And David Zaslav, or people are like quick to point at him, like, look how he's fucking things up. And it's like, this shit was sinking before he got on.
Yeah, it's been going bad for a long time. And I don't know, man, it's a strange world we live in where we say, I don't know if Man and Prince, Purple Rain can get us any money back. Like that's a bad feeling, man.
That's pretty amazing. I almost feel like, I don't know, like if you're selling off these licenses for $500 million, $500 million, Sony's like, yeah, we'll fucking take them. I feel like Sony's going to make more than those 500 million in a decade or so. Like, I don't see how, like maybe they're so hard up on this money that they're like, we might not be afloat in 5 fucking years. Let's just get rid of this. Because you're right. It seems like, how do you not make money off of fucking Purple Rain? Like, I know it's not a ton of money when you're looking at $49 billion, but come on, man. That's printing money year after year.
Yeah. And these are almost like evergreen properties, I feel like, right in the right hands, where it's like, we've had Batman films that bomb before. Batman and Robin exist, but the character is like resilient and you're still fucking it up somehow. And then it's like Prince is one of the biggest fucking artists of all time. So you're talking about selling his catalog because you're billions of dollars in debt and saying it's not enough. Like that is fucking incredible to me.
Well, things are not looking good for him, as this is the final news piece this week. The casting announcement of David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan's casting as Superman and Lois Lane in James Gunn's Superman Legacy reboot film has generated controversy, with fans expressing disappointment and calling for the reinstatement of Henry Cavill and Amy Adams. So his Superman Legacy film draws inspiration from Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. It is currently set to premiere July 2025. This is the movie that kicks off his universe, right? As much as people are like, James and Warner Brothers were like, it's the Flash. Oh, it's not the Flash. The Blue Beetle. Right now they're saying Blue Beetle. He's like, that's a part of my universe. As soon as that flops, it's going to be, well, now we're really getting the kickoff with Superman Legacy. If that shit sinks, I don't see Gunn, one, getting renewed past his 2025 contract, but I really don't see DC making any more, Warner Brothers Discovery making any more DC films themselves. I think they'll definitely then look at the highest bidder, hopefully it's Universal, and say, hey, you want to make Batman films for a while?
Oh, 100%, dude. Like, and I really feel like the ship has already sunk, to be honest. Like I said, there was so much marketing and hype for the Flash, and just, so I meant to talk about this earlier. I had a friend that was excited to see the Flash, a coworker, and he asked, hey, do you want to go see this when you get done with the con that you're working? And I was like, I'm probably not going to see that, man. And he goes, all right, well, I'll message you the day of. And he didn't message me. He went with his girlfriend, and he showed up for work, the Monday after. And I said, oh, how was it? And he goes, man, that shit was rough. And he was excited to watch it too. And he's like,
man.
Usually he gets down and dirty with people on the internet and will argue for something that he likes. But he's like, dude, everything people are complaining about, it's 100% true. Like, it looks bad at parts. This whole defense of like, it's meant to look like that. He's like, there's maybe parts of it that were meant to look like that, but there's definitely parts that you could tell they just put out there. Like, they were not finished. It looks rough. The storytelling is strange. Like, it's confusing in ways that it shouldn't be confusing in. And he said the jokes are just really painful at times. I feel like that was That was all of the baskets left, right, that they had to put eggs in and put them in there, and it still did not go over. So I honestly won't be surprised if this Superman movie, one, gets delayed, or two, honestly, gets scrapped. Like, I'm not going to be shocked.
Oh, I hope.
Like, you know, how much marketing money can they have left with how bad off they are, and how many more times can they go, all right, we got one more last ditch effort here. Like, if Blue Beetle bombs, right? Because Blue Beetle comes out before this movie, right?
Yeah, Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2 and also Joker 2 come out right before Legacy.
I think Joker 2 is probably fine.
Yeah.
I think that movie has a built-in audience. Aquaman 2, I think, could go either way. Blue Beetle, I think, could go south for them very quickly and easily. So I think if that movie bombs, depending on how much cost they sink into it between the actual movie itself and the marketing, I think if that thing bombs, Superman could get scrapped. I'm not a marketing manager, but to me, that's just too much sunk cost, right? Like, I think Joker 2 will make them some money for sure. I think it will do well, but I don't know if it gets them out of the hole they're in. It can't, right? Like, it's too much. So I think at that point they have to go, if Blue Beetle bombs, they have to go, all right, we made money on Joker, we lost money on Blue Beetle. Let's say they break even on Aquaman. I don't see them pushing out that project. And if they do, the budget's going to be rough, I think.
Yeah, he's going to have no budget. I mean, look at who they cast. I mean, it's like, who are they? And I know,
right,
I get
exactly.
Henry Cavill. It's like, I get Henry Cavill wasn't a big name, but Amy Adams was. And, you know, you had Lawrence Fishburne in there. Like,
and that's how generally movies go. If you have a lesser known actor in the lead role, you get really high profile supporting actors. And then with this, it's like, also, you know, at that point, Warner Brothers was not backed up against the wall when it came into their budget. Quite the opposite. They were flush with cash from their DC projects. Now it's like they're in a bad spot, man. So I don't see how that movie comes out and they don't take a shortcut somewhere.
It's incredible how much they really screwed things up with them. They were betting, like you were saying, it's like, okay, we got this Flash movie. We got Michael Keaton in there. So all those old Batman fans are going to come back for that. We have the Man of Steel cast, some of them coming back. So maybe we can get some of the Snyderverse guys in there. Plus we kept Ezra. So maybe they can come out for that. So we're going to have that crowd. We're going to have the Michael Keaton crowd, which the general audience knows. They love Batman. And we got Ben Affleck in there. We can get them in. So we got a surefire hit. So we'll use some of that money towards Superman Legacy. That'll help fund some of that. Instead, that flopped. Joker 2, which has the best bet at making them the most money for Legacy, is the movie that the first film they wanted to not make. Walter Hamada tried so hard to get that film to sink, to not happen. He cut his budget by half. And then, and this was, the director said this was a move to get him to quit the project, and he didn't. He's like, okay, well, we'll just have to make it on the cheap. And he saw what they were doing, and he was like, okay, they're trying to get me to get off this movie, so we're going to make it. And so he was like, we just worked under the radar as much as possible, and we were pretty much done with the film at that point. And Warner Brothers had such little confidence in that they split the profit with a Chinese company, which they paid for half of the production of Joker, and then they received, I want to say, like either 100% or a majority of ticket sales to that film, because Warner Brothers was like, this shit isn't going to make any money. And it ended up making $1 billion fucking dollars. That's how much of a joke Warner Brothers is, where they didn't even make most of that money from Joker 1. And that's probably going to be their saving grace with the sequel. It's like, how are they the fucking, not even the Archie, because Archie's successful in a way when he screws up. But how are they like the bumbling idiot that's like, well, whoops. Oh, they pulled a homer, basically.
Yeah. It's like every Warner exec is just a different member of the Three Stooges. Like, they just keep finding more Stooges. Every single one of them is Larry, Moe, and Curly. But they're just resuscitating them over and over. I don't know, man. Like, at what point do you say, all right, we don't know what we're doing here. We're just going to back off of this. And I don't say that in the sense of like, I don't want to see these these superheroes in good movies. It's the opposite. I want to see them in good movies. It's, we saw what happened, in 97 when we had a shit Batman film, and that's Batman, dude. This is more damaging to these lower profile characters than just not having a movie.
Exactly. Like Catwoman is still a relatively big Batman character, and when we hadn't seen her until The Dark Knight Rises, and we were probably lucky that we got her in that.
And Nolan kept that under wraps to a degree too. Like, we didn't really know that Anne Hathaway was Selena Kyle until like a couple of weeks before that movie came out. And I think part of that was because like you said, that movie bombed, and Catwoman is not a low profile character, but there was just this stench associated with it after the Halle Berry movie. And so Nolan is like, well, this makes sense for the story, but I'm not going to run every press junket saying like, hey, guess what? Catwoman's in this.
I don't know if you care at all about this casting. And I will say, because there's been some confusion on this, I'm obviously on that camp of like, I don't want this casting. I want Henry Cavill. I want Amy Adams. Like you've got a perfectly fine Superman already who has an install base, who, when you put him in, bring back Zack, finish his story. Those 2 last fucking Justice League films, film them back to back. Zack says he's willing, and you don't want to do it because of ego. So, by me demanding Henry Cavill and saying this isn't Superman and this isn't my casting, people are immediately like, well, people said the same thing about Heath Ledger and they said the same thing about Michael Keaton. It's like, that's not what I'm objecting. It's not at all about, I don't see him as Superman. Or like, I'm saying those things because I want that shit to fail. I'm like, oh yeah, fucking Superboy. Do I really feel that way? My real answer is I just want fucking Henry Cavill. I don't give a shit about this movie. I'm not going to see it. It's not for me. But that's kind of the confusion that people are like, it's a more casting outrage. It's like when you're talking about this movement, it's not about that. And that's kind of the weird thing that they don't understand.
The short answer is like, I think just put Henry Cavill back in. Like it's already established. It's what makes sense. Every time he doesn't show up, people are pissed, right? So it's like, we keep hearing over and over about like the dude getting shafted, and people are mad. And so I don't see this casting going over well. And it's also like, I don't think there's any excitement for this Superman movie either, man. Like, no. I think at this point, I think reboots have a place, but it's like, how many fucking times do you have to throw the same dart against a wall saying, does it work this time? Like, dude, just put in the guy that made you money, man. It just makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be a very rough awakening for Gunn and for Warner Brothers Discovery when that Superman film comes out, because he's going to do a Superman Returns. It's going to be a very safe, very traditional, we're going to make a Superman that's smiling and saving cats from trees. He's going to have the red underwear. This is what Superman fans have been asking for. Well, guess what? The general audience doesn't come out for that shit. That makes those few comic fans, quote unquote Superman fans, or whatever you want to call them, that makes them happy. Like, oh, I saw the thing. But that's a small number. You want the general audience. You want the movie to create buzz. Like, holy shit, they destroy a fucking city. And that caused people to talk. And then the plot from BVS came out of that. And people wanted to see that and made over $800 million, which inflation, that's over $1 billion in 2023. So it's just like they don't understand that this is set up to fail. There's nothing sexy about this project. That's the problem. And the general audience doesn't give a shit about casting, red underwear, whatever. They just want to be, wowed, right? And this does not look like that project. And it's what's going to happen. They're going to blame the fucking boycott or whatever. But guess what? The general audience is going to be there too with their dollar. And I don't think Legacy is going to be it. When that fails, good luck with whatever next project he had lined up.
Well, and here's the thing too, right? I'm a comic book fan. I shower a lot, but like I am a sweaty nerd by definition. And like I am self-aware enough to go, there are not enough of us alone to make these high budget superhero movies profitable. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality of it. Comic fans have always been the minority. You have to get non-fans into the movie for it to make money. That's just what it is. So you have to make a movie that appeals to the general public. If you go, okay, what is the most comics accurate version of Superman? That inherently is not going to get people in seats. It's just not enough. And it's like you said, you have to create buzz around it. And going, all right, we casted this guy as Superman, and not having any big name actors attached to it, that's not getting anyone in there.
Well, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Like, how often during all this stuff in the last 15 years, I know you and I are on the same camp, how many times did people, friends, family members, whatever, ask you, hey, what's with that purple guy at the end of Avengers? Hey, what's with that, just questions about the films, that who's Reverse Flash? Shit that they knew you would know. Like, how often did that happen during that period? That's your fucking audience. Those are your ticket sales. And it was a shit ton of them. Like, you and I, guys that are explaining this shit, like you were saying, small number. I mean, do you remember how often you'd get asked all this?
Oh, dude, I think after every comic book movie that came out, they would ask me about, X character. And it's like, and I would explain it to people, and it's like, that's how you know the movie at some degree is profitable, right? When you have a character that nobody knows anything about show up and ask people like, oh, hey, what is this thing? I think when you have Superman and you can't create excitement about it, that's a fucking problem.
And I'm here for it, and we will definitely talk about it here in the future leading up to that release. But let's head into the final part of today's episode, the Bro Kept Block, what Sam and I have been up to since you last heard us. So Sam, what have you been watching, playing, or reading? What's been making you broke lately since you were last on? I know you mentioned the move especially.
Yeah, I have been moving. That took up a lot of my time. I did post it in the Discord when I got it. I did get the first hardback, like, omnibus version of Monstrous, and I've been reading that. I haven't finished it. It's really cool. I remember you saying, like, the storytelling wasn't necessarily 100% your style, and I can definitely see, like, it's not something I would recommend to everyone. But I do think the art alone is worth people looking at it. Other than that, though, I am very excited about the Dustin Nguyen CGC signing.
Yes.
So I spoke to Bobby about it, and he confirmed, like, hey, if you want to send your little monsters back in, they'll crack it for you. Have Dustin sign it and then regrade it with his signature. So I'm definitely going to send that in. I'm going to see what my budget looks like around that time and see if maybe I can send in. I have some Batman stuff too that I would love for him to sign, but that's like my top priority is getting that sent in right now.
Yeah, man, I'm breaking the bank with that because I'm like, I've seen him at cons, but to get CGC in there, he's got a line, and this is like this is as cheap as I actually think it's a little cheaper than what he has on his website. Like, I paid a good amount for that one animated series homage that I sent you the picture of on Discord. I think that one was $300 or $350, and it's like, you can get one of these sketches CGC signed, and I get that it's a head sketch, but you can get some of those for, I want to say, like almost 200, like 180, and it's CGC graded, includes the grading. I mean, the value is amazing. I'm sending in 2 books to get signed. I'm not paying for the remark on those because I'm getting 2 headshots, one of which is Ra's al Ghul. I told them, nice. I DM'd them, I'm like, mine's probably going to be one of the few Ra's al Ghuls, but like, my son makes fun of me for loving Ra's, but I got to have one of your Ra's. And then Kelly I'm like, well, who do you want, Kelly? Because she loves, that's her favorite artist too. And she's like, I want a Damian Wayne Robin. All right, so we're getting a Damian and a Ra's. We're getting 2 Al Ghuls.
Oh, he's going to absolutely kill that too. He's so good at drawing that fucking character. Yep. I do want to get one of the heads also, but I really, since it's already graded anyways, I really want him to sign that Little Monsters #1. This is like a side tangent, but on his shop, I meant to send it to you. Have you seen that fucking Redheads drawing he did?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna pick that up, man. That thing is absolutely incredible. So we gush about Dustin Nguyen on this show a lot, but if this is, if there's any first time listeners, definitely check out his shop. He's got some amazing original stuff, both of, characters that he's drawn over the years and characters that he hasn't, as well as, his original creations and stuff too. there's actually some of his original stuff on his site too that I both want to just get the actual prints of. And he's such a good artist that you look at his art and you're like, I don't know what this project is, but I want to read it now.
Yeah, he's incredible, man. I know longtime Brocat Brian Schaup. He's a big Dustin Wynn fan too, and I'm sure he saw the Dark Crisis variants that Dustin Wynn is doing for all the villains and heroes. So that's coming out I want to say starting next month. But I'm excited. The 2 issues I am sending are keys also just to get signed. It's the first appearance of the Gotham City Sirens, which is the final part of Heart of Hush that he did with Paul Dini.
That's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, and the cover is incredible. Him holding Catwoman's body and then Hush behind. It's the one they use for the trade. Like it's that comic cover. So that's another reason I didn't want the remark. I'm like, this is such a complete piece. Like even Dustin art on top of Dustin art, it feels like it cancels itself out, you know?
I'm spoiled in that I now have, because I'm living in the same city I lived in, but I'm a little more, I'm in the downtown area. So now I have 2 really cool shops by me. One of them has some of the standalone issues of his Streets of Gotham run, so I might pick up a couple of those and send them in as well.
Oh, that was a good run, man. I wanted that to be, well, I know Gotham Central is kind of what they based it off of, but even some Streets of Gotham stuff would have been great on that Gotham show. When I first watched it, I'm like, oh, I hope they put some of this in there. And that first season had like some, like, oh, this is like a decent GCPD show, and then it kind of turned into like its own wacky thing by season 2. But yeah, man, definitely pick those up because that was a great run. And it's a great run, but just owning them, like, why not?
Oh, yeah. And, I think Dustin's great at writing and drawing high profile characters, but I think where he truly, I think, sets himself apart as an artist is he has a way of drawing like lesser known characters, especially with villains, to where you're like, holy shit, this design looks insane. Like, who is this? Like, I had seen Zaz in a couple of Batman comics before, but when he drew him in Streets of Gotham and he was like a very central antagonist during either that first or second arc, I was like, this guy is fucking terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Really. Do you remember him in Batman Begins?
Oh, yeah. The scene, it's in Arkham, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also
he's pretty creepy in that too.
He chases Rachel Dawes down at one point. He's got the knife.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. The last book I'm sending into is the first cover appearance of the female ventriloquist that he and Paul Dini co-created. And it's a lot like that Redheads piece. Like it's her and then a bunch of ventriloquist dummies around her as she's laying down. So that's the other piece. I'm like, I got
really good with those like wide shots, for lack of a better word, too, where it's like the character, but it's not just the character in the frame. There's like other background pieces and like ancillary items like scattered about to make it like shows a lot of depth.
Absolutely. And I really wish that some of his, and I get that like he's got the indie work that's doing great, Descender and all that, but I want some of his like DC characters to really take off, like the ventriloquist, Bluebird even. Like I want some of these original creations because he and Paul and all them, like they deserve it, man. Like get them in a video game or in a movie or something, just get them some residuals if they sign that contract. Because someone like Dustin, it's like Dustin should have had like a major fucking hit character by now. Like he just designs them so great. And they're a hit in the comic world and among you and I, but it's like the general audience deserves to see these characters.
It's funny you mentioned Descenders. That was the one I was talking about. I couldn't remember what it was called on his shop, where I was like, these character designs look so fucking cool. And I'm probably going to end up picking that series up just because Dustin's art looks so good in it.
Yeah, man. We'll have to, swap pictures or whatever and show off the completed graded pieces. Cannot wait.
For sure. Another reason for people to join the Discord.
That's right. Collector's Corner, man. Got to do it. The only other thing I had going on this week, as far as, I guess what happened on Twitter was Brian Hitch, who was the artist on Ultimates way back in the day.
Yeah, I was never a huge fan of that. I thought it had some cool concepts in it, but I feel like that was during the period where Marvel just shat the bed a lot.
It was a weird period for Marvel. I got to say, though, teenage me loved the Ultimates. Like the art was, I love the artwork and I like the story. And when I saw that first Avengers movie, I was like, oh, I hope this is like the Ultimates, where they can't control the Hulk at the end and they got to fight him. And like, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it. And that was like a huge disappointment for me because I'm like, wait, how did they get the Hulk to calm down? In the movie, they don't explain it. It's supposed to be in the same continuity as Incredible Hulk even. So
it felt like a lot of that stuff, like you said, I remember reading the first few issues and thinking it was really cool. And I really liked Ultimate Spider-Man when it came out. I felt like they just had a problem. It felt like a lot of it when the arcs were closing was like the writers and artists getting rushed a lot because it would just, the payoffs ended up not being there a lot of time. Didn't David Finch draw Ultimates for a while?
Yeah, I know he definitely worked on Ultimate Spider-Man. I have some of his Ultimate Spider-Man covers.
But yeah, get back to your Twitter story because that I saw that and that shit is juicy.
Okay, well, I didn't know you had, so anyone that had it, I guess. He was on Word Balloon. I like Word Balloon. I like John, even though, I don't agree with some of his views, but, I think he's an excellent interviewer, and I look up to him, as a podcaster. I'm not even half as good as John. And that's, that says a lot about him. Like he's the leader of, I think he's the star in comic book interviews and nerddom. Like he comes from sports radio. He knows how to do this shit way better than anyone that I subscribe to or, myself, I'm, nothing compared to that guy. So that being said, I have a lot of respect for him, but normally in the past, like, he's very careful about talking about certain movies like Man of Steel and BVS and keeps it very general. Brian Hitch comes on and they're talking about The Flash, the Flash movie. And it's like, all right. And they're like, oh, well, I never really liked Ezra Miller. All right. And then of course they drag in the Snyder movies. They're like, well, in Man of Steel, blah, 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 BVS was, and they're going on about it. And it's like, oh my God, another fucking example of like, talk about the new fucking movie. Why are you guys still talking about these 10-year-old movies? Like, are you that obsessed with these old movies? So, and anyway, he started saying things that were factually wrong. Like he was saying that all of those movies are dour, that Superman is dour and dark and brooding. It's like, fucking watch Man of Steel again. Watch even parts of BVS. Like there's so much hope in BVS. If there wasn't enough of it in Man of Steel for you, like that guy embodies hope. The whole world is shitting on him and he's still doing the right thing. Like that's the message of that fucking movie. And it's like it went over their heads or so, or they just refused to accept it or whatever. He was just saying things that were like, he's like, there's no hope in those movies. And it's like, dude, you're wrong. So I went on Twitter and I called him out. And he's like, well, you're saying my opinion is wrong. I'm like, you're not stating an opinion. You're lying. Like I didn't say he was lying, but I'm like, that's not an opinion. That's misinformation. Like those aren't facts. Like go back and watch these movies and I explain like how these movies have hope and they have the things that he claimed they don't. And I'm like, but I guess, and I was, I was straight with him. I said, but I guess they weren't blatant enough for you, but they do make these movies now that are very blatant in the hope and the humor and he called it sunlight. In the sunlight, you have the MCU, you have the Flash movie that you were complaining about. That has plenty of what you're looking for, yet you don't want that. So he and I went back and forth on it. And he kept staying on that point of like, well, you're saying my opinion is wrong. And I'm like, dude, it's not an opinion. you're stating things that these are not facts. Like you're unintentionally lying about these things.
Right.
So that got him upset and, he blocked me and then John got into it and he was like, you have to get over the fact that some of us don't like these movies. And I'm like, that's fine. You can not like them. This has nothing to do with whether or not you like them. This is about what these guests are saying on there. And if we don't call them out, then guess what? We're back to 10 years ago when no one was calling out these reviewers and podcasters and bloggers and YouTubers that were saying everything under the sun to try to sink the Snyder movies. And the movement wasn't vocal then. We were like, well, we like them. We weren't organized at all. And now it's like, it's done. Enough is enough. Like we need to call out these detractors because they're shaping the narrative again. And we're not going to let that shit happen. And so that was the juicy bit of like, Brian Hitch, the guy from Ultimates, he then blocked me and someone showed me, he went on his Twitter and he put up this post that was like, what is it with these Snyder fans saying that my opinion is wrong? And you had a bunch of people that were like, dude, I get that they're annoying, but you got to stop coming on here and whining every time someone argues with you. Like you're a
Yeah,
professional.
I saw that post. Someone was like, I don't know what, I don't agree with them fairly often, but dude, you have got to grow up on social media.
And that was the one that I was like, holy shit. Like maybe if I was wrong or not, like there's other people that are like, dude, you got to stop acting this way.
Well, exactly. It's like, you can disagree with somebody but if you get called out on something, either own up to it or just move on from the conversation. Don't double down and then, act like a 12-year-old and just storm off. Like, especially because he's a fairly public figure. It's just a weird look.
Yeah, it is. And that got him more hate his way. Like people are pointing out that he can't draw hairlines on black characters. And so all the black community was like, dude, you still can't draw a hairline. The Black Snyderverse people.
God. That's amazing.
So it's just like, I do regret buying those Ultimate books, but it is what it is. It happened with Gail Simone too, when she said some awful shit on Twitter about the Snyder movement and like really bad stuff that I'm like, oh man, this sucks because I love your Red Sonja and I love your Batgirl run. And this is one of those things that it's like, man, that taints it as like, if she comes out with another one, it's like, I can't do it because, she's not a good person. So,
yeah.
So that was the Brian Hitch.
It's always rough when you like someone's work and then you're like, oh, fuck, man.
Yeah. They're assholes online or whatever. And she's like a 20-year-old. It's really weird. I don't know. Maybe something happened to her and maybe something happened to Brian that makes them act this way. But I know John.
I think it's just kind of the social media, like, era that we live in, for lack of better phrasing. It's like, it's kind of just like, I can say whatever I want on here and, act however I want. It's almost like a weird venting platform. It's like, I'm going to let out all of this, like, repressed emotions from all the times I didn't say what I wanted or whatever. And it's like, I guess I understand to a degree, but like, eventually the masses will regulate it, right? Like, yeah. Or hopefully, like, someone's going to. You can say whatever you want, but there's still a consequence. It might not just be like the traditional version of like the press is just gonna like come after you, or nobody's usually suing you for libel or anything over social media, but like people are gonna take action.
Yeah, and most comic guys that he has on there, like if someone does bring up the Snyder movies, most of them have probably had this discourse, and a lot of them are like, I'm not even going to get into the Snyder stuff. And they leave it at that because they know that, like you said, there are consequences to what's said. Someone can disagree with you, and that's going to happen. If someone can disagree with us right now, and they can tweet us, and it might happen. And guess what? That's our action. We're putting ourselves out there. He's putting himself out there. That's kind of to be expected. Like it comes hand in hand sometimes, especially when you're a big name like Brian Hitch.
Right, exactly. It's kind of, the consequence of fame or notoriety at a point. Like, I assumed it was a common thing. Like, oh, okay, people know who I am. My name is associated with this. I need to be a little more careful with how I phrase things or like how extreme my opinions are, because it's just, I feel like common business practice, right? Like there's certain things worth taking a stand on. There's certain things that it's like, I don't gain anything from this, right? From getting into these blow-ups over social media.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't even expect a response from Brian when I tweeted him, because it was just well, maybe he'll think twice next time, or maybe he'll like, oh, maybe I should go back and watch those movies, whatever it was. But it didn't end up being that way. And that's fine. I know John and I like had that little back and forth, and after I told him like why I explained myself to Brian and him, he just tweeted back with "let it go," and I didn't respond back. I'm like, okay, this conversation's done. Like that's it. Yeah. We didn't block each other. Nothing happened outside of that. So I don't know. Well, that's kind of what happened though.
That feels like a much more normal, well-adjusted adult response.
Yeah. So that's the tea this week, and the rest of the show, Sam.
It was an entertaining one.
I want to thank you I know you've been very busy. You're very tired. You're working a lot. You've got moving pieces. So to take this hour and a half to be on for the Brocat Core means a lot. And, I told you on Instagram and on Discord and everything, It was awesome working with you, and I miss you, and I'm glad that we can continue these conversations and stay in touch, especially, through social
Oh
media, if
yeah,
not through the
man.
podcast. So, yeah, so this does a
It's
lot
my
for me too.
pleasure, and I will always make time for this when I'm able to. And I miss getting to hang out with you at work too. I know I told you when they arrived, but I'm super happy everything went well with Kelly and the birth and everything. And I hope that you're adjusting well to being dad times two now. I'm sure that was an intense adjustment, to be sure, but hopefully everything's settling in and you and Kelly are doing great. And I'll speak myself, but I'm sure a lot of the other hosts would agree. We immensely enjoy being on here with you, not just talking about stuff that we love, but just talking about life. And if you ever need anything from us, especially me, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, man.
Yeah, same here, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
please, if I know you're not on too big on social media, but I know you're on the Discord, but otherwise let them know where they can find you if they want to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I am on I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter also. Both of those handles, it's just my first and last name, so Samuel Boylston. Those are probably the best ways to reach me, other than the Discord, which is the best way to reach me. And like I said before, hop in that Broke at Core collector corner, because I love seeing people's pickups, their CGC submissions, and especially any kind of artist proofs or anything you get. I love seeing original stuff, or even I'm sure in the general, if we have any artists that are listening, send us the stuff you've been working on, and send us recommendations for us to read too.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. So good call out right there. Thank you. And to you on the other side, if you have a friend that would enjoy this podcast, this show, whether it's another Dustin Wynn fan or someone that is a fan of Xbox or the Snyderverse, let them know about the Reasons I'm Broke podcast. Tweets and Instagrams and all that are great, but word of mouth is the most effective in getting someone else to give the show a shot. So thank you so much for joining us this week. I've been Daniel, joined by Sam, and Broke at Core. All will be well. So Sam, we're getting some Ronin console soon, maybe not. Are you getting the full Scott now that you've done a few episodes with him of his little nuances and
full Scott is fully in motion. Yeah, we should have some new episodes up relatively soon. Unfortunately, when I moved, I was in the middle of editing an episode and my computer is now not starting, as I told you. So I've got to figure out A, how to finish that, and then B, when we can record the next one. But yeah, there's definitely been a few times in the Discord where I've had to do essentially what you did, where Scott's, God bless him, I love him. He's got his opinions and I've got mine, and Scott will just go off and I'm like, I'm just going to let you get this out, man. I'm not responding. You just say what you need to say, buddy. Get it out there. I do have a funny con story for you if you want to use that to fill
Sure.
Yeah. So I was in Minneapolis for a work convention. We were doing a Magic Con. Super cool city, by the way. If you ever have any reason to go, I definitely recommend checking it out. So I show up. Jimmy has already been there since the previous day. And usually Jimmy and one other guy will kind of set up all of the staging area for the prom. We get there and the pallet with all of our product and the staging it was sent on the wrong plane. It was in, I think, Texas.
Oh no.
So Jimmy's, calling him on the phone and they say, well, we can get it to you by Monday. And the con ends on Sunday. So he's freaking out and we break for the day. We go eat. Owners take us out to a nice dinner. And we're at a very high-end steakhouse, one of the best ones in the country. And the owner quickly remembers after he sees what I'm ordering that I am vegetarian. So thankfully, we had a really great maitre d'. He saw that I ordered portobello fries, which I thought were going to be fries with portobello mushrooms. They were these massive planks of fried portobello mushrooms stacked up to my head. The meal is insane, right? Because everyone gets an entree, and then I got like a heart of foam salad, and then the owners got shareables for the tables, essentially one of every app. So I'm engorged at this point. I feel disgusting. I've eaten so much like vegetable lasagna and herb mashed potatoes and portobello planks and everything that I can eat. And the maitre d' comes by and he goes, "Are we going to be having dessert?" And I'm like, "Oh, please, God, no." And the owner's like, "Hey, everyone get a dessert. We'll be getting some. You can get one for yourself or you could share one." And so another guy that I work with, Jerry, who's also a big comic book fan, is like, "You want to split a piece of cheesecake between the four of us?" I'm like, "Fuck, fine, man, whatever." And so it comes out, the cheesecake's the size of my head. And I'm like, "Thank God we're splitting this." The guy next to me at the table orders this, those brownie sundaes you would get from Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
It's that, but on steroids, dude. The plate takes up like the size of like a work desk. It's massive. And the maitre d' comes out and shoves a steak knife into it to show, and it doesn't move. That's how thick and dense this fucking brownie sundae is. So I'm watching him eat it. We're recording him. Somebody points out that he looks like Fudge from Goonies. And he starts laughing, like full belly laughing. And then I just hear him go, "I'm in pain." And I didn't realize it, but the guys, because it's a long table, the guys at the other end of the table, to them, it looks like he hasn't eaten anything because he's eating off one side. And then he turns it around and it's perfectly halfway eaten. Long story short, the guy ate that for the rest of his time, the entire 4 days we were there.
Wow.
And it was incredible. And after the dinner, the owner comes up to me and he goes, "One, I want to apologize for forgetting that you're vegetarian." I'm like, "Dude, it's totally fine. There was lots for me to eat there." Our owner is like in his mid 60s, I believe. And then he pats me on the shoulder and he goes, "I am so proud of how many calories you took in tonight." Like I'm like a 12-year-old or something. And I'm like, "Thank you, Jerry. I really appreciate it." And then he just randomly handed $100 bill to a homeless guy.
Wow.
Yeah. What an interesting human being.
Yeah, he's like a comic character himself.
He really is. But yeah, it was just so funny watching this guy my age just go, "I can eat this whole brownie by myself." And then all of us going, "What the fuck are you doing, man?"
You're in your 30s now.
Yeah, instant regret as soon as it came to the table. And then he saw that another group of guys at the table was splitting it among 3 people and they weren't finishing it.